Hello, this is Malcolm Collins. I'm excited to have a special guest here today. This out of all of our special guests, it's probably the YouTuber who I watched most before this. But it's funny, it's that the thing I knew him most for was Warhammer content because people who know me know I love lore. And anything with a ton of lore, I love. But now he is known as a conservative politics commentator. So he's got his Arch Warhammer channel, which is just Arch, and then the Arch Cast, which is his more politics channel. Very similar takes to us. I'd say very sort of new right, this new right movement that we have an episode on this where we're like, it's really weird that like the online right today is descended from like the online atheist movement of like ages ago. I was like, how did that end up happening? But what I wanted to talk with you about today was because you're such an expert in obviously like popular media. I guess I'd call it like low media, the type of media I prefer: video games, Warhammer, Star Wars, all of that. And so I wanted to focus this conversation on two particular questions. One is that we have been fighting against the sort of like mind virus that's been controlling our society for a while now. And finally, with this vibe shift over these past few months, it feels like the tide has finally, not the enemy troops have broken rank, and we can attempt to do something now, right? But the question is what does that look like what does taking advantage of this look like? And then the second question I want to focus on in this podcast is we are increasingly seeing that despite whether it is fantasy games or video games or media, the demand for it has never been higher, and yet the mainstream companies don't seem to be able to produce something that demand wants anymore. There's obviously a ton of opportunity that's opened by this. How do we take advantage of this? What does taking advantage of this look like? And where do you see the future of the media space going? So take the stage.
Okay, it's quite a lot to unpack there, isn't there? What does winning look like, I suppose, is the first question, because I don't think we know just yet. I don't think anyone quite
Great
knows.
question. What does winning look like? Like in your head, like how would you answer that? That's a great fucking question.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because I have been seeing a little bit recently as well that there have been I don't know about resurgence, but more like a creation of a new group of people who are now moving into the space. As our side is becoming more popular, we are going to see a lot more people join our quote unquote side, in essence.
Like Zuck, did you see that?
Yes, exactly. Zuckerberg getting rid of fact checkers, which is an obvious attempt to kiss the ring of Donald Trump, in essence.
You already moved the fact checking team, that's what's left of them, from California to Texas to try to make them sane again. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, of course, then the normal thing. Whenever a political movement gets into power, then everyone else will begin to move up to join around it for advantage. This is why Disney and all of the entertainment industry joined around the left, because they saw advantage in doing so, rather than an ideological one. And then, of course, a lot of people were hired into that company to be like, okay, we need you to explain to us why it's a good thing to be progressive. You're going to be in the HR department. You're going to hire people like you, and we'll be popular. Didn't work out so much. So a lot of the how do we continue from here is going to be studying what the left did wrong and attempting to avoid that whenever possible. Because we are not trying to simply recreate the left's rise to power, which was meteoric and then plungingly meteoric in the opposite direction soon thereafter.
I love that you pointed that out because it's one of the things I've heard pointed out that I really wrap my brain around is that the time period of American history, while we lived through it, what we call the urban monoculture or the far left, the time period where it was the dominant culture in the world is probably the shortest any civilization has ever held power. It held power for like 20 years before dying. Like it's wild that happened. And I think that one of the things you point out, and it's one of the things that I think that we all need to be very careful about, is us repeating the mistakes that they made now that we have more power. And a lot of people, like James Lindsay has been calling out like the woke right and stuff like that. And I think some people bristle at this, but I think he's very smart to be doing this because the biggest mistake that we can make is attempt to do what they did to us, which is impose our cultural values on people who don't want those cultural values. if we can just enforce a system of cultural freedom, I think that, to me, that's winning enough, because it might be stable. But thoughts?
Absolutely. I myself have been kind of mulling this over, the idea of the tyranny of neutrality, to enforce this upon everyone, to bring back the idea, if you're at a gaming table or a comics convention, make discussion of politics and religion taboo again, and we'll allow these to be in specialized spaces where people want to bring them up. Allow fantasy to become an escapist hobby again.
Yeah. Well, and there's so much you can do with fantasy. So one of the things that I've been working on recently, some people know this, is I've been funding the development of a game. And when we were like deciding on game worlds, what we've ended up focusing on is a post-apocalyptic LLM based world where we're sort of like automating everyone, but we were looking at doing an izakaya world. And one of the izakaya things I was looking at doing is, oh my God, can we have like historic civilization?
Hold on, you mean isekai?
Isekai, sorry, that go all in on their historical tropes. Like, can I have like a Native American civilization that's like the most extra like Aztec-y thing ever? Can I have like Middle Eastern magi floating on magic carpets? And I was like, it was genies and stuff. And I'm like, it's so wild that we lost this world of being able to like lean into ethnic and religious tropes, even though like the wokies might have a problem with like a magi on a magic carpet, like dressed up like a, but I don't think Middle Easterners would. They'd find that dope. Like, so yeah, the new worlds that are accessible to us is really exciting, but then how do we not overplay those worlds' hands? And I guess people would be like, oh, well, look at Warhammer. This is an example of overplaying into rightist fantasies. And yet, even there, we seem to be, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, all entertainment goes in waves, right? So things will be popular and then things will be, wane in popularity again. We had an era of a lot of very high-flying, very positive heroes, like, the original Superman, for example, the Boy Scout. And we grew tired of that after a while, and then we started looking for darker Superman, evil Superman. And now we've been doing that for so long that it too has become boring, and we're looking back to bright Superman again. A well-functioning entertainment ecosystem is one in which you have all of these things. You don't have one of them to an exclusive extent. You have opportunities to play 40K. You can play Lord of the Rings. You can watch Superman. You can pick and choose whatever you want. The problem with having the overarching political narrative that we've had with the left was that it needed to dominate. 40K needed to become more progressive. Superman needed to be more progressive. You got to get rid of truth, justice, and the American way, and so on. And then you just have everything be the same slop.
Well, do you think, by the way, with the news, because I've heard some people arguing this, but the evidence doesn't seem that strong to me, do you think female custodies are out now?
I don't think so. GW barely spell checks their own rule books these days. So until they make some sort of pseudo-official announcement and maybe the next codex that they only were men, always were men, I'd assume they were in. But at the same time, the female custodies were obviously a bit of a forced marketing stunt to begin with, as they still have not actually produced any models for them. So, who knows?
Well, okay, so here's a question for you to the initial questions. Do you feel like the big game studios can reverse course in time to financially save themselves? I mean, obviously Ubisoft can, but what about the other ones?
That is a very interesting question. Now, Ubisoft, Tencent is smelling around them because China, of course, sees an enormous opportunity here to sweep in whilst the Western entertainment industry is weak and just take over everything. I mean, Marvel Rivals was a huge wake-up call for them where they're like, hold on, we can take all of this just by having women be attractive again? Well, shit, we're going to do that. And so whether or not Western gaming industries, they don't have to just refocus on becoming profitable. They have to do so while some of the largest corporations on earth in China are actively competing against them. So yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle.
I'll add, I think it's, I shared in the private chat of this tweet to this end that this is an issue, I think, largely of staffing. And I think that one thing that means that maybe this war can be won is AI. That basically teams can be made very, very lean, very aligned, and less bloated. Because when it comes to executives who say they feel pressure from stakeholders to engage on issues like
Yeah, I want to
Just-
pull up that graph actually. That was really fascinating to me because I had bought into this narrative that this was all like downstream of BlackRock and the funders.
Yeah, and this is not about funding. This is about employees at these major companies being like, we need to have LGBTQ plus rights highlighted here. We need to talk about climate change. Like, we need to talk about gender equality. And I think once we see developer teams get really small, game studios get super small and boutique and super powered by AI, we will be less likely to be caught up in culture war issues. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on that. Like,
Well, hold
if
on, I
these
want to
studios-
make clear the poll that you're talking about. So there was a poll done
Okay.
recently. What it showed was that if you're looking at like where are CEOs feeling pressure to make things woke, it is predominantly from employees and not shareholders. So if you look at something like reproductive rights, 91% of the pressure came from employees, 15% they felt pressure from stakeholders. LGBTQ rights, 92% from employees, 10% from stakeholders. This is gender equality, 90% from employees, 10% from stakeholders. This is predominantly something that is coming inside the house.
The key to fighting wokeism is to fight the rare, loud, threatening, and manipulative woke individuals, specifically individuals within companies, or to make CEOs or power players and not afraid of these individuals anymore. It is fortunately not that we need to defeat BlackRock or something like that. Not that I wouldn't love to defeat BlackRock. It's just a much harder task than defeating Sharon.
Which implies to me that this is predominantly a governance question as well. The larger and more sprawling a studio is, the more it is likely to get caught up in culture wars or ruined by cultural trends. The smaller a team is, the more they can autistically focus on whatever the subject of the game is, like whatever makes it cool, like the lore and the design and the changes in kind of really cool gameplay. Anyway, do you think that these studios can get small enough, or that enough small boutique studios can sort of take over the market to make things cool again?
Potentially. We have seen a rise in indie developers for quite some time now.
Yeah.
And I mean, the size of the studios is absolutely a thing. Because a lot of these companies will basically, well, they'll hire people on the assumption that they know what they're doing. So if you hire a marketing executive, you presume that he knows about marketing and what the market wants. Often they don't. And then you also have
more
an
often than not.
Exactly, that hires based on politics. So if you've got one dude who's like, okay, I'm going to get the best person for the job, and then you've got another, I'm going to hire the person I like, the person who aligns with me. And then they get more power, then they hire the next guy who thinks like them, who hires like them. And then you have bloat, where you've also got, this was the thing at Creative Assembly, which has like 900 employees now.
Jesus.
They were hiring people because people in the company were like, you got to get a job here. The benefits are incredible. And they were just making up positions.
Oh my God. And this brings me to something that we often say is the way companies went woke is they were at first like, oh, we've got to hire more diverse people. Okay, we need to hire somebody who's incompetent, but like fits some diversity metrics. Where can we stick them where they won't do any harm? HR. HR doesn't actually build anything. HR doesn't actually do anything. And they conveniently forgot that HR does the hiring. And that's what led to what you're talking about, I think.
Exactly. Like, I mean, it became the world's largest market. Like, entertainment is enormous. And so much like government, it becomes a place where everyone needs to find a position for their friends and family and cousins and everybody else they know.
If it really is that bad, it's no wonder that things got as crazy as they did. I would be shocked if they didn't. Just when any organization gets that big, it's going to happen.
Do you think these companies can, like, do you think it's only going to be small companies that take over? Or do you think that there's any hope for, or if you were going to give advice for the large companies out there, like, how do they fix this?
Well, again, that's the problem, because you've got the reverse issue with China, which also have enormous companies, but they are aligned in the opposite direction politically. Like, China is no less censorious than the West by any stretch of the imagination, but they're leaning in an opposite direction to them. And they are more of a collectivist grouping, so they have an easier time maintaining these large functional hierarchies without being ruined. And since they are now also in a position where they are producing what people actually want to buy, they are going to have a very large advantage. But AI, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
is an excellent potential leveler. I mean, we're already at a point now where we can have AI make art and programming. So what is the reason why we can't have one guy essentially do the work of 10, making art, making programs, making design documents, etc.? Like, that is a competitive advantage the West can take advantage of.
As somebody who's designing a game right now that's using, AI, LLM based AI, because for a long time we said video games had AI. And so I find it very weird. I mean, no, like actual AI in games, which is to say a lot of the quote unquote programming that I am doing is writing story or writing characters, which is something that like anyone can do. And I'm even using AI to help with this. The degree to which games of the future, and I mean near future, I mean like next year or the year after that, are going to be like one guy writing to an AI, I want a game that does X, how do I do that? And who can win in that environment? I mean, I just don't see how companies can even begin to compete. Yeah.
I mean, the end goal that I would like to see is the democratization of entertainment, where everyone can do whatever they want. Like, instead of having the Lord of the Rings trilogy, you have 5,000 trilogies made in 5,000 ways. Some focus more on this thing, some focus more on that thing. Some of them are even diverse and woke. Like, you've got Black Arrow going over there. Everybody gets to make their own take on anything and everything. That's how we liberate entertainment.
And if it's good, people play it.
Yes.
It's
now
funny
the fear is that the companies will take monopolies here. Like, that's the danger, that they are the ones with the money. So they go, okay, we're going to make an AI, but only we're going to be allowed to use it.
Yes. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. And I wonder if this is going to lead to new ways that fantasy universes can explode or be used, because games, as much as, I'm not a fan of where Warhammer has gone recently. What they did with their license in video games is very interesting. They basically gave their video game license to like any team that wanted it, which led to this extreme explosion for a period. I think they've got a little more restrictive now of Warhammer based video games, where, and I don't know of any other brand or license that's been this loose with their license. But it's led to a lot of really high quality content and a lot of attention that the brand wouldn't otherwise see. Do you think anyone else has learned from this? Do you think they're going to continue going in this direction?
Maybe. It was a lot of exposure, which was good. It produced a lot of good stuff, which was also good. It produced some hot garbage as well, to be fair. And now they've got more protective, because one of the interesting things here, like back in the day, we used to have a lot of crossover stuff. Like, company used to do a lot of fun things. Like, you would have Conan with Howard the Duck or whatever. Whilst now everybody's trying to build their own walled gardens, particularly with streaming becoming the next big entertainment thing.
Yes.
Everyone wants to carve out their own market and then protect it aggressively against all competitors. So I don't know. I fear the day of like this, like, liberal interpretation of IPs is probably past, at the very least, unless we do some serious reworking of IP laws. But who knows?
Well, I can think of one. So with streaming, I'd note, I don't know if you saw this, but it fell 23% year over year this last year in the United States, which that's insane. That's like a quarter less people watching. So the streaming wars might already be over to an extent with them eating each other. But when we talk about people who have done a good job of building a universe and letting anybody build in it, Scott Cawthorn. I cannot sing this guy's praises enough. If people don't immediately know who that is, that's Five Nights at Freddy's guy. When people would make fan ripoffs of his game, he would go to them, he would fund them to make real games that they then could go sell. Now, of course, anybody who knows the Scott Cawthorn story, I might do the whole episode just on him. He's been pilloried by the left because he donated to conservative politicians. He's got like 7 kids. I don't know if you know this. But anyway, he's been very good at supporting the fan environment and the creator like circle environment. And it's paid off very well for him, but I haven't seen anyone else play the Scott Cawthorn game in the way that he has.
Yeah, and I think that is a good idea. You mentioned you're working on a game. I'm working on a setting myself as well.
Ooh, tell me about it. Tell the fans.
Very secretive at the moment, as we're very early on. But I am too very much so interested in having people come in and be part of it. Like, I want to offer license to people where it's like, okay, you want to write a story in my setting? That's okay. We're going to have to approve it before it becomes like official. Yeah. But if it has quality standard and it's up to, like, it's respectful to the setting, I would like to take that and publish it for you. Like, bring in more enthusiasm.
Oh my God, yeah. So hold on, I have a question for you. How are you, because this is the other big thing right now, if you're creating something, how are you using AI in what you're creating? And how are you thinking about it as a creative tool?
I'm using AI to fact check myself, basically. I basically ask it to find holes in what I'm writing, because the AI is quite good at that, like discovering little things, like, because it'll ask questions like, how does this work? And I'll be like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Okay, I'm gonna have to write why and how that works now.
I love that. Yeah, no, I have found that even just today, I was really surprised to see this. Well, I'll write something where like if I was doing Warhammer, it would be like, okay, this is how like this Space Marine chapter works. And then I put it in an AI and I'm like, what other interesting things do you think this Space Marine chapter would do, or traditions they would have? And while like 10 of its ideas might be junk, like 3, I'd be like, that's really fucking good.
Yeah. That's the thing with AI. It's not necessarily that clever one time, but you don't need to do anything one time. You wanted to make a drawing for you. Okay, maybe 9 are shit, but you make it produce for you 100 drawings, and 10 of them are going to be good.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So as you move into this space, are you looking at, if you don't mind me prying a little bit, is it going to be a video game? Is it going to be like a tabletop game? Is it?
Both. We'll do tabletop first simply because it's easier. So we can have a product out quicker, and then we can use the eventual assets to digitalize it further down the road, because these things do need to be digitalized in the modern age. Nobody's going to have the infrastructure of Games Workshop with brick and mortar stores all over the place.
I'm really glad you're
STLs.
doing this, by the way, because you're clearly a lore nerd. And one of the things about the video gaming hobby that I remembered growing up is if I wanted interesting and out there plots that were against the mainstream, like not within mainstream narrative, video games is where I could consume those. These days, it feels like they're pretty isolated to anime, like it at all, right? Like, and if we saw within tabletop and stuff like this, and I know that you'll create something like this, genuinely interesting lore again, I'd be so excited.
Oh yeah, like the East has had a almost monopoly on creative stuff for a while now, because they'll do anything. They'll do like, okay, Isekai is popular, but the main character is a vending machine.
This is a literal show, by the way. This is a
Yes.
literal show.
This is a thing. And like they let them do crazy stuff. Like we had this back in the day too. There was a video game called Messiah where you played a baby angel who was sent to Earth to defeat Satan.
And you would take over bodies.
So I wanted this game so bad. I read about it in PC Magazine, and then I saw it in stores, but I didn't have enough money to buy it back then. And then later when I wanted to buy it, there was no way to like go and find old games. This is going to be weird today for kids, but like if a game was like 5 years old or something, at one point in my life, there's just nothing you could do. You'd have to like go to stores that specialized in old video games, and like they would have any random specific game that you had missed.
Yes.
And you would, yes, continue, sorry.
Like that was such an off-the-wall concept. It's like, okay, how do we do an action game that has nothing to do with action, where you're basically helpless, but you got to control people? Like, okay, well, there you
And
go.
a baby angel taking over bodies. I love it. That is a really good point. Okay,
Not
so
creepy at all. No.
well, no, I mean, another thing that I think about, and I was telling Simone about this, and it's actually really interesting, and I don't think people have really internalized how big this is going to be for the future of gaming as a medium. And if people don't understand, why are they talking about games? Games are a bigger, like, money spent medium than I think TV and movies combined right now. And so where gaming goes is where culture goes in the future. And I was thinking about, how do I promote like my game when I'm ready to launch it? And I'm like, I just need to piss off games journalists and then reach out to people who I already know are my friends. Like, Side Scrollers, who's the #1 gaming podcast, or like Grums or something like that. And I'm like, they'll all promote. Like, if you are, I think, slightly centrist these days, like just not captured by the virus, and you want to create a game, there could not be a better time in history to do it right now.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing too. It's an easy accusation to level against the anti-woke, quote unquote, that everyone's just really negative, that hating on everything. It's not really true. Like, we would like to promote good things, and we do so when we can. It's just that the mainstream entertainment, which is what most people know about and talk about, is bad. And the only way to get good out of that is to criticize the bad until the company goes, okay, that's not what you want. Let's try something else.
Yeah. So I'd encourage people to get on that, because I think that they'd find more promotion than they otherwise would expect. At the beginning of this, we asked a question. I want you to come back to it. What does winning look like to you?
Ah, yes, that's a difficult question. I mean, I genuinely just think it will look like an increase in entertainment quality again. Honestly, a return to the 90s, 2000s, where we were allowed to do more stuff. It means both, frankly, straight up attractive people in screenplays again, and more adventurous stories as well. Like, I would like to see both Superman and Batman return to the old school, and then we can construct off that again. We need to kind of reset a little bit, because then you can have a Batman Beyond, a darker Batman, while still also having the hero Batman. Instead of now, where every iteration of him, he's just darker and angrier and more upset and depressed about things.
I hear that. Well, another thing that I'd like to see in terms of a return is, while we've had a lot of good indie games come out, they typically make themselves work by being very light on lore, and we haven't had great lore in a long time. I'd actually argue that maybe Five Nights at Freddy's represents somebody trying to re-inject a new lore environment into gaming, because people are hungry for it. Are there any games or properties that you felt recently where you're like, I've really enjoyed this lore and it's new?
Like a dense lore building setting. In gaming, I would probably reach back to Kenshi, but that's not exactly a new game either. Because mostly, honestly, I find it more in anime and manga, as you mentioned, that they have more freedom and ability to build larger, more interesting worlds. Whereas in gaming, we're kind of stuck in a bit of a quagmire of this.
The roguelite era.
Yes. Where you haven't been able to like build the large worlds either. And it's also a thing to remember as well, that if you're going to build a large universe, it takes a very long time too. And if you're spending that time trying to get a video game off the ground, well, that's not cheap. Like, that's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars and years of your life, you know? I mean, how long did it take Tolkien to create his world?
This is a really good point. Well, and one of the things with Tolkien's world is it has become so ubiquitous that alternate fantasy settings has struggled to get off the ground almost.
Yeah, I mean, one of the issues is that we are right now dominated by a handful of cultural entities. You've got Lord of the Rings, you've got Star Wars, you've got Disney, Marvel, DC, and these have kind of created the fantastical canon of our time. So trying to reach outside of that is very difficult, because it's become the orthodoxy. Like, it's one of the reasons why I think Black Myth Wukong did very well, because people saw that for the first time and like, I've never seen this before. A monkey with a giant staff. Huh, okay. What are these weird gods that are popping up everywhere now? What's this mythology? This is nothing like what I've seen.
Really good point. Well, and you mentioned the orthodoxy, and I'd also say here that the orthodoxy has been shifting. There's been a few properties that have had an outsized impact. Warhammer is one of them. I think that within this generation, especially among the dissident group, Warhammer is really big. Another one that's been really, really big, and we sort of use as like the one that our show references most, is Starship Troopers, which has had a hugely outsized impact on like culture and tropes and world building of our time. And I would like to see more stuff built taking ideas from these shows. And I think when people have done riffs on these shows, people have been very excited about it. Like Helldivers, obviously, is a Starship Troopers ripoff. And I think you could do more interesting religious people in space ripoffs than Warhammer, like Space Crusades.
I mean, it itself ripped off Dune enormously, for example.
Yeah, well, and Dune's another one that's come back now. Like, people didn't rip off Dune for a long time, and now everything's like Dune.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the old saying that creativity is a myth in essence, like new thinking. You've got to find different sources of inspiration and build upon it. I mean, that's the reason why BlackRock started investing in 40K, because they were looking at it and thinking, Could this be the next Star Wars, maybe? Let's get in there on the ground floor.
I by the way, I think that we as civilizationally are so blessed because it's such an unlikely timeline to be on that somehow somebody destroyed the Star Wars brand. Like,
Yes.
how did that happen?
Why is it good?
I mean, it's good because it opens the door for other people, I guess, but
Yeah.
Disney managed to destroy one of the biggest entertainment industries ever produced. Like I did a video on this a while ago where an insider was talking about how Disney had basically only got Rey left, and they were asking themselves, like, how the hell
I saw
did
that
we
episode.
take this setting and all we've got is Rey? Like, where's Luke? Where's
And no,
Han?
and
Where's
they had
Chewbacca?
listed
Leia?
this in like internal memos or something. Like Rey is the one character, and they believe that's all they have left. Now, actually, they might have like Mandalorians could still be interesting, or like, but they can't see that because Mandalorians are fascist, right? You know, where actually that'd be a pretty good setting. I think that'd be really cool if you did one during the Mandalorian Wars. Oh, did the Mandalorian Wars even happen anymore, or was that wiped out with the new continuity?
I don't know. I mean, right now, I think the latest thing was that they were going to do a super prequel of the first Jedi, presumably rising up against the ancient Sith empires, which
And it
could
broke
be interesting.
all the lore, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Right? Like,
I mean,
how do you that up?
I'm kind of imagining almost like a Jesus story, where like the first Jedi begins rising up against the Sith empires, founding in essence a new religion, beginning to explore the tenets of creating a new faith. That could work, but I guarantee you the tenets of the new faith will simply just be diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you know what I would do if I was running the Star Wars franchise? What I would do is I would go and look to see what Star Wars fan fictions are most popular. I would then reach out to those writers and hire them to do my show and my writing because you know they've become popular in an environment where they're not financially rewarded and the fans like them.
Well, one of the problems is they also tried to destroy those. Like they had Thrawn, who was a very popular villain character, and they put him in Ahsoka, and they made him an idiot. So,
yeah. Well, and also, how did they? This is actually something I have a question of because I loved Clone Wars, like the original Clone Wars, right? Like it was great. Yeah. And then the guy who did Clone Wars wasn't he the guy who did like one of the more recent bad things?
I think so, but like. This, too, is like a people who are established in this kind of setting kind of thing. The recent Batman show with Harley Quinn being a fat Asian psychologist, that was Bruce Timm, the creator of Harley Quinn, who did that to her. Like,
really?
Yep, that was Bruce Timm.
Sorry, I remember correctly. Harley Quinn was created for that 80s Batman cartoon, right? Like that epic version of her.
Yep. She was created for Batman the Animated Series by Bruce Timm.
So this comes to, we did an episode called The Wachowski Effect, where we're like, why is it that you can have a good creator who becomes terrible after they transition? Like, I was like, you know, you get the same guy who wrote like Mass Effect 2 is doing like Dragon Age Veilguard. Like, and I was like, okay, well, maybe gender transition does something to your brain, but it's like, maybe it's not gender transition. Maybe it's just like the woke ideology more broadly makes you a shitty writer.
It definitely is, at least in part, because one of the things with the Clone Wars, because you've got the two Clone Wars, the first cartoon animated series, which was incredible, then the 3D CGI one, which had its moments, but was definitely of lower quality. But one of the things George Lucas really like imparted onto his people when he was doing that was like, watch World War II documentaries. I want this to be a war series about war things and war and conflict and action. Whereas now, like, look at Ahsoka, look at their recent thing. Like, it doesn't have an authenticity to it anymore. Like, the only reason why Mandalorian became popular was largely because of Grogu. It's like little dumb babies. Like, oh, great, babies are cute, therefore it sells. Whereas Mando's own adventures, I mean, he's basically a spaghetti Western character now who wanders from place to place, saving people for no particular reason.
Did you, by the way, actually watch Ahsoka?
I did. I got through that thing.
Did you watch Acolyte?
I did watch Acolyte too.
I am so sorry. You're
I cannot. Good television.
I just watch cultural critics complain about these things. I can't bring myself.
No, Ahsoka was painful, particularly considering Ahsoka's one character that could have been really interesting, as she was
Yeah.
always portrayed as fallible, that she didn't quite know where she was. That's a bit of an interesting growth story, but she never grew up. That's the
Oh,
issue.
that would happen in the show. She never really.
Yeah, no, she's basically the same character. Like 17 years later, she's still this whiny brat who's looking for other people to save her and guide her along the way. Like Anakin has to show up and go like, "No, Ahsoka, please, you can do this, dumbass."
Yeah. Gosh, I was just thinking it would have been interesting to do a show that followed on that character who betrayed her in Clone Wars. She's still alive, right? Because she was taken by a prisoner by the Jedi.
They
other
killed
kid.
her off in Tales of the Jedi.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, they killed her. But she because I actually quite liked that episode where they framed Ahsoka for the bombing of the temple.
It
Because
was great at making the Jedi look evil. I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
totally get the Sith point here, like
because she comes up like you've become corrupted, and she's standing there in front of the Emperor, going like the Republic is no longer what it was. Yes,
yes.
correct.
That was such a way to do the Jedi are actually bad, because the Lokes always want to do the Jedi are actually bad, but that's like a good way to do the Jedi are actually bad.
Yeah, like they're judgmental, set in their ways.
Oh gosh, what was the other, just nerding out about shows here at this point, which I like. Okay, so what? There was another setting where I was like, oh, by the way, other brand that destroyed itself is Star Trek. Like, what the heck? There's so few brands left. I wonder if Warhammer can be used. Like, do they catch on? Because Warhammer could be great to be used. I feel like Starship Troopers, somebody's gonna buy this and do something with it eventually.
Shouldn't we just build new lore though? I mean, I like the earlier point you both made, which was, hey, this leaves room for disruption. I think it's really sad that we've devolved into a world of cinematic universes and prequels and sequels and all of this, because I want to see new ideas. And we admire Tolkien because he created something. Now, of course, he was riffing on plenty of old themes. I'm not expecting people to create entirely new ideas, and they shouldn't. Let's riff. I mean, Malcolm and I've recently been doing episodes and having a lot of conversations about the Omegaverse, for example, which I wouldn't say is like, this is not a universe I want to dive into, but I think it's a really good example of taking dynamics and presenting them in a novel way and creating all this lore and having it be like genuinely weird and novel. I want weird and novel. Let's talk about the pressing issues or not, but like emerging issues that are happening now. Like, what is happening to our society? What is changing about the nature of humanity? And what lore can we build around that helps us think about it and wrap our minds around it? I mean, a lot of what Tolkien helped people wrap their minds around were like the Great Wars, for example. What can we create with lore now that helps us reason through the reality we live in?
Absolutely. Like, ideally, we should have more new stuff as well. I think a lot of people are just like focused in on the established settings because there's a degree of nostalgia there. Like,
it's comfortable. It's comfortable. Yeah. And
exactly.
It's safe. Like, what you're getting. And sometimes I think a lot of us now turn, especially to more passive media consumption, or like when there's so much choice, we're tired. Like we've spent the whole day making decisions. We're done making decisions. Just like, I want to know what I'm getting. I want to have a good experience. I get that. And I guess, there's the question of how do you break through the noise? If you have a billion tiny game studios and a billion tiny creators creating new universes, how do you get an audience? How do people even find it? And how do you get?
Here's a question, because I actually want to look at where they've somehow made good products. Like, how did Arcane
the big
happen?
studios? Oh yeah, Arcane. How did that happen? Yeah, that was surprising and unexpected.
Do you have a thesis on how Arcane happened?
I think Arcane is an interesting example of a product that has just like a smattering of a little bit of current year politics in it. In that is, I've got a very diverse cast, all female, etc. But the quality of the writing is such that it all becomes ancillary. Like, you don't care anymore. It's good enough to outweigh all of this. Because there's also a fear of having your gaydar, your wokedar, over-tuned to the point where you become the feminist. Like, you can't enjoy anything.
Yeah.
And Arcane was just, it was obviously a bit of a labor of love. They wanted to do this. All of the characters are well executed. They're beautifully animated. They have their own stories and histories, and it makes sense. I didn't like the ending of the second season because it comes across as too much of a, we need to have sacrifices that don't matter because they're all actually really alive, etc.
Well, I will say one thing that people don't know about the League of Legends lore is a lot of people view it as like slop lore that Arcane was working for. But one of my friends who I knew because I was supposed to be in his class at Stanford and I delayed for 2 years was Aaron Estevez. And he was the creative director when they were developing most of those characters at Riot Studios. Now, people don't know, what show was he the showrunner of? The original Avatar: The Last Airbender. So a lot of the lore that went into Arcane was created by the guy who created the original Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is one of the only good woke properties to exist in this era.
Yeah, like League of Legends has a lot of lore. There's actually quite a lot of dense storytelling back there.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm very excited about this idea of creators going out there and creating content. And I love to hear that you're creating something now, because when I've watched other popular creators before, something I haven't seen is the creation of video games or content that aren't just like a joke. Like, okay, for example, like Zero Punctuation created a game, but the game was like a joke about zero punctuation. Like Angry Video Game Nerd created a game, but the game was a joke about like Angry Video Game Nerd. Can we get people who have proven that they understand lore and content in a way that the public likes to also want to create games?
Well, I think it requires a certain drive, which I do believe is quite rare, because there's a lot of effort placed into this, like creating a game, creating a universe. It's a lot of work. You need to write a lot. You need to think a lot. You need to have a lot of money. You need to be financially stable enough to pour thousands into this. I mean, just on the idea of having the free time to do it as well. You know, if you're working a regular job and you come home late in the evening, you're then going to sit down and write for 2 or 3 hours. It's exhausting, of course. And there's also a degree of like being scared. Like it's easy, it's safe to make a joke game because your fans will play it and they'll love it and they'll be in on the joke. But trying to create something serious, you are putting a lot more of yourself out there at that point, which of course comes with the risk of failure.
It's a great point. Actually, Zero Punctuation, I should say that while he has created a joke game in the past, right now he's creating a real game, which actually looks pretty interesting. So we'll see if it ends up doing well. I don't know if you followed the drama with him and the like woke company he was working for, like firing him and then falling apart.
A little bit. They seem to have created their own little studio now, Yahtzee and that crowd, and they seem to be doing fine. So I'm happy for them.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that. Well, anything else you want to? What was the other topic here? Oh yeah, what should we do now? Like, if you have an audience now and you were part of this fighting against wokeism. Now that the ranks have broken, what should you be doing to capitalize on this? Because I feel like if we don't, the pendulum's just going to swing back and hit us in the face.
Well, you need to stabilize the victory first and foremost, because we are getting a little ahead of ourselves. Like the left are still the ones in possession of the levers of power in governance and in the industries. And so it's all well and good to pat ourselves on the back and say that we are winning, because we are. But like, there's another 3, 4, 5 years before we see the true fruits of what we've created.
Yeah, there's I would say there's still a major insolvency in all of these large studios. The employees are still there, and the call is coming from inside the house. So
yeah. And like you said, like the work is also started like 20 years ago, but we only saw it for like the last 10. It was like in 2014 where most people suddenly went like, something weird's going on here. And then another 3 or 4 years before we understood what was going on there. Like, all of these cultural changes are slow and take a lot of time. And there's also, of course, the worry of the pendulum swinging too far in the opposite direction. And then we just have to chase after it and argue with those people as well. So solidify the victory. Just keep doing what everybody is doing and then start looking towards creating your own stuff. Because you will eventually have to, presuming we manage to win, you will have to transition away from criticizing the bad to creating something good.
Yes, and we've got to create our own things. And I think that's a big thing that I would really galvanize the audience to do, is start creating. there is room now. You know, you've got a giant market and you've got the big game studios in retreat and unable to compete against you. This won't be the case in 5 years.
Yeah, you got to get started.
Yeah. And so I really appreciate what you're doing on that front. And I appreciate your channel as well. But yeah, it's great to have you on.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And by the way,
if you, I mean, for like the 5 of our viewers who don't already watch both Arch and Archcast, check them out on YouTube. Really, really great content and really great annotation of like what's going on in both like the gaming world, but also sort of in larger culture, but through a gaming lens. I really enjoy it. Like I am completely outside of the gaming world. I cannot play anything that doesn't like pay me money.
No, but I mean,
but
I think
I love your
Warhammer
content.
is important
so,
to dive into for
yeah.
a modern audience. If you don't know Warhammer lore, you should know Warhammer lore because it's one, it's culturally relevant and it's becoming more culturally relevant in the same way Tolkien's works were. And it is really good lore. And the reason why I like it is lore, and I've talked about this before. I haven't heard any like big Warhammer channels talk about this, but it takes a simple woke question. When I was in high school, there were so many people that was like, what if like everyone who believes in a religion or something like that, they bring that religion into existence by believing it. So like Muslims get a Muslim heaven and Christians get a Christian heaven. And Warhammer's like, yeah, but if that was true, you'd get power spirals around really simplistic emotions really quickly that would then create gods that would functionally be evil from our perspective. And so the only way you could fight them was through emotional control and like stoicism. And that turning on the head of a common thought experiment I find really fun.
Oh yeah, because of course the chaos gods themselves, they're simple animalistic creatures at that point. Okay, rage fuels me. I'm going to make more rage happen.
Yes. Now it can interfere with reality and create feedback loops. I love that. Well, it was great to have you on.
Here you go. I'm really on a nice place. Okay.
You sure are.
Popcorn too.
Tyson wants popcorn too. I'll get you some popcorn.
We can have a little bit of popcorn. Popcorn too. Here you go. I'm really on a nice place.